I'm going to be making pecan bars today. Years ago on Food Network, there was a show called 5 Ingredients or Less with Claire Robinson. I don't know if it's still on or if they do reruns, but this recipe is from the Thanksgiving show that she did, or one of them. I copied off the recipe and I've always wanted to try it, but I never have. And the date on the recipe says November 16th, 2010. The ingredients for the crust are flour, brown sugar, salt, and butter. A lot of butter. And for this I'm using plant butter, but you go ahead and use regular butter. For the filling, I used some flour, Caro corn syrup, some brown sugar, some salt, and pecans. I ended up using this whole 10-ounce bag of pecans. By using the plant butter, I changed this recipe into a vegan dish. So if you have somebody that's vegan, this would be a good thing to try, and everybody could eat it. I'm starting out by making the crust. The recipe calls for 1.5 sticks or 3/4 of a cup of cold unsalted butter. And to cube that, well, I didn't read the recipe very well. I didn't cube it. I added 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour and 2/3 of a cup of light brown sugar. The recipe calls for a teaspoon of kosher salt, but since I was using the plant butter, which is salted, I just used a scant amount of salt. I started by cutting the butter in with a pastry blender. Before I got too involved with mixing up the crust, I decided to line my baking dish with aluminum foil. The recipe said to use a 9 by 13 inch baking dish, and I don't know why I had it stuck in my head I needed to use the smaller 9 by 11 inch dish, so that's what I did. Here I am just spraying the aluminum foil with cooking spray. I go back to making the crust. This recipe says to use a food processor to mix up the flour and the butter and the sugar and the salt. And when it's the consistency of sand, then to add a couple of tablespoons of ice cold water to it to pull it together into a dough that you can then press into a crust into the pan. Plant butter is a lot softer than regular butter, and it was really cold, but it was a lot softer, and so it made a softer dough. I didn't need to use the water with this, and all in all, I think it turned out pretty well. So I'm pressing the crust into the pan lined with the aluminum foil, and I did go up the sides a little bit. After I get it smoothed out, then I bake it in a 350 degree oven for 20 to 25 minutes. So next I start on the filling while the crust is baking, and I'm roughly chopping these pecans, and I need 3 cups, and a 10-ounce bag made almost exactly 3 cups of chopped nuts. So starting on the filling now, I add 1 stick, which is a 1/2 cup of unsalted butter, softened. And again, I'm using the plant butter, a cup of light brown sugar, a pinch of salt, and then I added 1/3 cup of light corn syrup. I sprayed the measuring cup with cooking spray before adding the corn syrup so that it would release easier. Now, as I said before, I didn't read the recipe very well, or I didn't retain what I had read, and I wasn't supposed to add the corn syrup at that time. I was supposed to just add the butter, the brown sugar, the salt, and then mix it for 3 minutes until it becomes really creamy. And then you add the 1/3 cup of light corn syrup and the 1/4 cup of unbleached all-purpose flour, and then 3 cups of coarsely chopped pecans. I left the crust in for 25 minutes, and so now I'm taking it out. It probably would have been fine at 20 minutes, but you can see it's golden brown and looks and smells delicious. And so now I just add the filling on top of that. You need to be careful because the pan is still really hot. And this filling isn't really very easy to spread. So I probably should have just pat it down with my fingers. But it still works with a spatula. Once the filling is spread evenly, then it goes back in the oven for 30 to 35 minutes. Here's complete footage of the tripod falling over and my phone going into the filling, the pecan filling. Into the oven it goes. And this is what it looks like after 35 minutes in the oven. At this point, I'm wondering if I did something wrong or if I should have pulled it out at 30 minutes. It's now been a couple of hours and it's cooled completely. And so I'm going to pull it out of the baking dish and pull the foil off of it and then cut it into squares. I was expecting this to be more of a pecan pie type thing, and it's really good. I like it, especially after having had a couple of them, but it's not very sweet, which is good. And it's very nutty and crunchy. There's just enough of the brown sugar and the butter in the filling to keep the pecans together. It really is just pretty much a nut bar. It's very good, though. The crust reminds me of a shortbread crust. It looks like it's hard from the way I'm struggling with cutting it, but it really wasn't hard to eat at all. I cut this into 24 bars. I stored this in an airtight container and put it in the freezer to prepare for the holidays. After being stored in an airtight container just on my counter, they had softened a little bit. So here you have pecan bars. They would be a really nice addition to Thanksgiving to serve with pie or on a Christmas plate full of cookies. When I try these again, I may just sprinkle some sugar over top of them after they come out of the oven, just white granulated sugar. I also think they might be interesting with some salt sprinkled on top. So give these a try. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.